Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Dharma Breeze. We're starting a little early tonight because Michael has graciously offered to take over the chairperson duties for me starting next week. So he's wanting me to go through my usual spiel so he can write it down and hopefully improve it for how we do our services. So welcome. This is the Dharma Breeze service. The midweek service is sponsored by the Ekoji Buddhist Temple. It's a time for us to get together to hear the Dharma in the middle of our busy week and hopefully give us some inspiration to get through the weekend. I'd like to go over the service format with you. What we do is we start off with a silent meditation where I will ring a bell and then we ask you to relax and then awaken once the bell is rung. Then we will do a chant. The chant will be provided to you through a PDF for those that don't have the book. We use the Red Hawaii Service book. Then I will do a Dharma talk or a sermon. This is usually relatively short, and it's a stepping off point for us to have a discussion later on. Then we will go into a group reading. Again, this is something that we will do together, myself, and I'd like you to join me. And again, that'll be provided on a PDF or in the Red Service book. And then one of the things that I'd like to share tonight is that we're trying to expand our readings. So starting in the next few weeks, we will be having different PDFs and we'll have readings from different resources. So we'll be able to broaden what we do as a joint reading together. And then we will do another silent short meditation. And at the conclusion of that, we will turn off the recording for privacy issues and we'll go into the Ekoji's famous discussion group where we'll discuss the subject that was brought up tonight or whatever else you want to bring up. One of the nice things is with our virtual Sangha, and we have people all across the country, and we open up to questions and comments for people about what is important for them this week. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to first start with silent meditation. If you could please sit up straight in your chair with your back straight and your feet flat on the floor. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namadats, namadats, namadats. Okay, so tonight we're going to be chanting the Jusei Ge. If you could please join me on your PDF. And for those that have the Red Hawaii Service book, it is on page 54. Dagon Chosegan Ishin Mujodo Shigan Fumanzok Seifu Joshogak Ga 祭小便具政府上昇学合詞成仏道妙正長寺法空教未正門政府上昇学利欲人少年上映修本業四具無浄土一生天人師人力現代公不生無才道少女三苦名交際集約難回避知恵言滅死公門永息小悪道巣脱全宗門高僧上満足いよろじぽ日月修寿期天候不言一種解放像公正功徳法上大修寿説法四宿供養一切仏具足修徳本元年出上満得意三大王如仏無下知津脱未不詳願学営力投資最小損志願若国家大仙王感動国小天に東内妙慶ラマンランラマンラムナマンダムナマンダムナマンダムナマンダム元にしく読平等正祭同発大心往生あなんとNamdats, namadats, 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 namadats. So good evening again, everyone. It's nice to see everybody here. We had snow for the first time in a few weeks here in New York, and it was absolutely beautiful. We went out and had to shovel the sidewalk, and then it melted. So I guess it was good work for us, but we got to appreciate being outside. And as all of you know, snow can be such a transformative uh, event to especially a busy city where sometimes everything's not as clean or as well painted as it looks in the pictures or in the movies. One of the things that I've told people that if they ever want to come to visit New York as members of Ekoji or the Buddhist Churches of America, we do have rooms that we do rent out for people that want to stay here at a very reasonable rate. And we are in Upper Manhattan near Columbia. So it's a wonderful environment. We're right across the street from a park. So it was absolutely beautiful to look out the windows and just see the trees covered in snow. So today I wanted to do the subject about called deep hearing. This is one of the ideas that we talk about as a key component of Jodo Shinshu understanding or practice. And for those that have studied Shinshu, we know that we don't formally have a practice. We say the Nembutsu, but you do hear that in Dharma talks or when you do readings, they will talk about deep hearing. But before I go into what deep hearing is specifically in Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, I would just like to step back and talk about the idea of how the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, look at sensory perceptions, how we deal with things in our mind, and how we can understand what we feel, experience, hear, and see in a very Buddhistic sense. I think that being raised in another tradition and coming to Buddhism as an adult in my mid-20s, I had a lot of preconceptions about what a spirituality is or what religious teachings are. And I was raised in the Christian tradition. And my grandmother, as I've mentioned before, was a very devout Christian, and she would come visit us in Washington, D.C. every summer, every other summer. And during the time, I would do a practice or Bible study with her. And to this day, I respect the Bible and will refer to it. But as I was growing up, one of the things as we start going through puberty, we know that some of our, how should I say it, everything is heightened. Our bodies are going through real dramatic changes, and it's not only physiological, there's hormones going on where we can be very moody. And so this is the time where a lot of religious institutions will say, okay, well, we have a book for people that are your age. And so my grandmother came and brought a book that dealt with how you deal with adolescence. I don't remember the title of the book, but it was how to deal with adolescence through the Christian perspective. And so she gave it to me and I started reading it. And it was a very practical book. I won't go into great detail. I think most of you can get a kind of a feeling about it. It's basically dealing a lot with our awakening of hormones and sexual attractions and things like that. And how do we deal with that? And so they gave very concrete things like, you know, you don't wear tight clothing and you don't go to dances and you don't do these different things. And I remember thinking that when I was reading this book for myself personally and what you're supposed to do and what you weren't supposed to do or how you're supposed to think or how you're not supposed to think, because this particular book addressed it as that, is that I felt that I, as a person, as a teenager going through these changes, there was something wrong with me. That this book was telling me that I should act in this way, which seemed contradictory to what I was going through. And I felt a lot of guilt and anxiety after reading this book. And my grandma, bless her heart, she was very good and I'd ask her questions and she would answer them. But after she left that summer, I looked at the book and I thought it was a real turning point for myself because I thought, I feel more shameful for myself for having these feelings and then not and trying to override these feelings and not acknowledging that I'm a human being, that I'm an imperfect human being. And so that was always in the back of my mind when I started in my 20s looking for a different spiritual tradition, something that fit a little bit better for my personality. And I think that that was one of the things that I really appreciated when I first encountered Buddhism. And there's so many different variants, especially when we come to Buddhism as somebody, as young adults in our 20s with our minds open and we're looking for something different. And one of the things that I appreciated is that they talked about, Shakyamuni Buddha talked about that life is suffering. And I've given the talk on that before. And as I've said before, suffering is basically being uncomfortable. It's not just something that happens to us. It's not like I am suffering because I do not have income. It could be suffering like I always want to have something more. A lot of it is our own creation, that we create our own suffering. There's always something that we're wanting more, or there's something that we don't feel comfortable with. But then when I was introduced to the teachings of Jodo Shinshu, Shinran specifically talks about us being bombus or foolish beings, that we're imperfect beings. And instead of the paradigm that I was from this book as a teenager, where these are what's going on with your body, and this is what you should do to stop that, and this is the way that you should change your thought processes, I thought, from my perspective, through the Buddhist teachings, that all of these things, all of these feelings are a way for us to gain self-knowledge and to follow the Buddhist path. So instead of going through, let's say, like with for males going through adolescence, one of the most embarrassing things is our voice changing, right? And there's absolutely no way where you're trying to talk and all of a sudden your voice goes up or your voice goes down. And then I remember being very self-conscious about that. And according to this book, this is part of it, but then you should, but that's part of what your body's changing and you need to get through it. But part of it is from the Buddhist perspective, they would just say that this is where we are in the present moment, looking at our fallacies and our strengths and how do we deal with this and how do we grow from this. And so the idea of, for example, that we are more aware of we're very self-conscious, again, not picking on poor teenagers, but reading this book when I was a teenager, very self-conscious about what other people think of us. And part of that is that the Buddhist teachings would say is that we're thinking about what the other is thinking, not where we are as grounded. So the idea is that we take not responsibility, but we're aware of our feelings. Is like, well, I'm feeling very self-conscious now. And we realize that that is our dukkha, our suffering, by putting that on ourselves, what we think that other people might be thinking. So getting back to this idea, which I found very, I don't want to use the word enlightening because that's a too strong a word, but very exhilarating, was this idea is that here we are, we're imperfect beings, and that's okay that we're imperfect beings. And so that the idea that through the Buddhist teachings is that we try to take these imperfections and we work with them and we try to use them as a prism to understand our difficulties. So getting back to the idea of deep listening or deep hearing is that the historical Buddha talked very much about our senses. And there are 5 traditional senses that we receive information about the world through. And then the last one is our human mind. So the first one is that we have vision, we have hearing, we have smell, we have taste, we have touch. Now, all of those are very easy for us to understand. And a lot of times when we talk about teaching the Dharma school kids, when we talk in Dharma school, we talk about that, what we see is what we try to do is we try not to cloud it with how we think things are. So when we see something, for example, if I am walking down the street and I see an animal, let's say I see a dog, I think, oh, that dog is an old dog, that's a young dog. Oh, that dog looks like a pure breed. Oh, that family must have a lot of money. Or that dog looks homeless and is probably going to not make it. The Buddha would say that the vision part is that we try to keep pure, is that we look at it and we see it as an animal that we identify as a dog. And that's our human mind that makes us make these judgments about these other things. And we'll skip hearing because hearing we're going to talk about in a very Jodo Shinshu perspective, because the hearing is not just the hearing that we do in our everyday life. It's talking more about some of the doctrinal ideas about Jodo Shinshu. But again, the idea of smell and taste can be, I think taste is an interesting one. I'm very fortunate that my parents, growing up in the Washington, D.C. area, there is every type of cuisine growing up. And so we tried everything. And then my nephew is scared to try anything. And he'll say, I will, I remember him, Joe, you'll appreciate this. He was visiting me in Seattle. So I took him to the Pike Place Market. I drove him all the way from Puyallup, 40 miles, and we go to the Pike Place Market. And we're down there and there's all these wonderful food vendors and all this. And I said, oh, and I say, do you want pizza? No. Do you want Thai food? No. We ended up going further and further out of the Pike Place Market. And we ended up eating at a Burger King in downtown Seattle. And I said to Owen, I said, he says, well, I don't like it. And I said, have you tried? And he goes, no. So I think it's a perfect example. Sorry, Owen, my nephew, forgive me for using it as he'd probably laugh now. He's in his 30s and he's eating Thai food. That's great. But it's a perfect example of how our mind looks at something and how it can change the perception of it very dramatically to be able to even not want to try something. And then the idea, again, with the other senses of touch and smell. But getting to hearing And we hear in Jodo Shinshu Buddhism is that we have deep listening or deep hearing. And listening, I've heard people talk about, well, why don't we use the word listen? Because here, in the everyday sense of the English word, is that I hear something in the distance. That means I might not be paying attention. I hear a dog barking. I hear a motorcycle on the street below. There is Reverend Earl's Okinawa dance class downstairs. I'm listening to the music. One of the nice things about living here is this is such an interesting place. So there's Okinawa dance every Monday night with live music, and I can hear it. So I listen to the music. So people say, well, shouldn't we say that I do deep listening because I'm listening and I'm paying attention? But the reason that we use the word hearing in this sense is because it is from the doctrine. So, and for Jodo Shinshu, as we all are aware, originated in Japan, and our founder Shinran Shonin was a Japanese Tendai monk. And so the Japanese word for hearing is mon. And this is a gate for us to be able to open up and to be able to hear things, and specifically in this case, the Buddhist path. Now, the interesting part is that in other forms of Buddhism, when they talk about hearing, they're talking about cultivating wisdom or prajna. So what they're trying to do is that when you're listening, wisdom as in spiritual wisdom, which is prajna, that you're opening your ears to be able to hear and to be able to build upon. Now, that's not the Jodo Shinshu understanding of to build upon, because that would be what we would call perhaps self-practice, is that I'm listening, I'm developing prajna, I'm developing this foundation of understanding in order to go on. So Shinran's interpretation of listening is not just that. What it goes to the doctrine that we talk about often and we repeat often, because it's not the most clear concept to understand. And what it's talking about, I think the English word, instead of listening or hearing, that it's awakening to, is the word that the Japanese translators chose in Kyoto in 1997, is that when we are hearing this moment, we are awakening to. And so what are we awakening to? So as a Shin Buddhist, we're awakening to Amina's primal vow as the highest expression of compassion. So when we talk about Shinjin and entrusting, this step of awakening is this hearing component. Now, I know that I don't mean to pick on Nori. I don't know if they're not here tonight, so I guess I can use them as an example. Sorry, Ken. Sorry, Nori. But the idea is that everybody has Buddha nature. Everybody can be a Buddha. But the idea is that, is there the stream enter component to Shin Buddhism? Entering the stream is a general term for people that enter and start studying Buddhism. So does that mean that just because I'm born into this world, that I will automatically receive Buddhahood or enlightenment at the end of my life? And I think in this case is that Shinran is saying there is this active where there's this awakening too. If you are in a country that has no exposure to Buddhism and you don't hear the mon, the hearing, then what is the awakening to? So again, I'm not saying that that's impossible. I'm not saying that you can have this awakening through another form of spirituality. Or I've met people that have this natural ability to see things as they are. But for most of us, and I think Shinran is stating that's why he came up with this concept, is that there is this step of awakening, and that's awakening to Shinjin. Because when we talk about Shinjin, does Shinjin spontaneously happen, or is there some component that we bring in? And that's something that I'd like us to discuss in the discussion group, because even within the Ministers Association, this concept, is there something that's, because people are very black and white, well, that's self-power. Is that self-power, or is that just exposure? And we can talk about that. So again, this idea of mon or awakening is Tomido's primal vow, an expression of compassion. And so then the end result of this process is that when we say the Nembutsu, and we talked last week about what the Nembutsu is, and of course we know that I take refuge or I praise Amida Buddha is what it literally means. But then this understanding of that when we talked last week about the Nembutsu coming out spontaneously, the idea is that, this idea of listening, having Shinjin, and then expressing the Nembutsu, it's not segmented, it's not conceptual on our part. It is something that is working through the compassion or the vows of Amida Buddha, through the Dharma, through the karma of our predecessors. So again, when we think about the senses in Buddhism, other schools of Buddhism will focus on each one of these teachings about the different senses, the five senses. And of course, I said the sixth sense is the conceptual or the mind, which of course could be, a completely different idea than the physical realms. So tonight, when we talk about deep listening or deep hearing, in this case with Shinran Shonin, please remember as a Shin Buddhist, it's not just simply sitting Sunday listening to a Dharma talk or listening to Zoom or reading a book. It's the idea that you're opening and awakening yourself to the potentiality of Amida's primal vow. So if you could please join me in closing Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Amadats. Okay, so what I'd like us to do is conclude with a group reading where everybody will join me. And as I said, one of the things that we're doing is we're going to be introducing a variety of readings that will give us different flavors of the Dharma and perhaps even touch upon the subject matter we're discussing that night. So tonight we are going to together read the Homages, which is on page number 2, or the PDF. Hard is it to be born into human life. Now we are living in it. Difficult it is to hear the teachings of the Blessed One. Now we hear them. If we do not gain an anticipation in this present life, we may not be freed from the interfering of the oceans of births and deaths for kalpas. Let us reverently take refuge in the three treasures. We go to the Buddha for guidance. May we always walk in the way that leads to enlightenment. We go to the Dharma for guidance. May we be submerged in the depths of the teachings and gain wisdom as deep as the ocean. We go to the Sangha for guidance. May we all with one accord live the life of harmony in the spirit of oneness, freed from the bondage of selfishness. Even through myriads of kalpas, hard is it to hear such excellent and profound teachings. Now we are able to hear and receive them. Let us try to understand the Tathagata's teachings. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Okay. Let's do a short silent meditation before we join the discussion. So please join me sitting erect. Relax your shoulders and your feet squarely on the floor. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namadats.